On this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Welcome to this episode of the Life Science Success Podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I am a digital marketer in life sciences. And we're just going to hop straight into the episode today. And my guest today is Dr. Ann Conn. She is a triple board certified physician and chief medical officer of NeuroGlympse, a pioneering TBI diagnostics company. And so with that, welcome to this episode. Thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So would you mind just sharing with everybody a little bit about yourself and sort of what led you to this line of work?
Yeah, I had an interesting journey, probably different than many of my colleagues, because I got a BS in chemical engineering. And, that still informs a lot of the way I think, actually. But then later on, I went to medical school. I didn't know anything about neurology, and I discovered it in medical school, and I had an interest in pain. And as my training was going along, the field of pain was being transformed. So I was very fortunate because by the time I was wrapping up my neurology training, interventional pain management fellowships were starting to receive certification. And I was actually the first fellow to do the certified fellowship at Charity Hospital in New Orleans. So I was very fortunate because my training involved a combination of the neurologist, the interventional pain doctors who still are mainly anesthesia trained, and actually a really wonderful orthopedic spine surgeon named Evelina Berger that later went on to become the first woman to head up the American Orthopedic Association. So I was just really fortunate that the circumstances came together for me to be able to do that. And then after that, I continued on and received board certification in headache medicine.
Oh, very good. And how does having your triple board certification in pain management, neurology, and headache medicine shape your approach in terms of patient care and also innovation in healthcare?
Right. As I already mentioned, most people that do interventional pain are anesthesia trained, so they come at it at a different way than I do. Neurology is a very interesting field. It still interests me, even though I don't practice general neurology. I practice my subspecialty headache medicine. I do interventions for headache, and I do interventional pain management. And obviously, I've over the years evolved to do a lot of different things that I would imagine we're going to get to in this podcast. But so my engineering training too just gives me a broad way to look at things that comes in handy.
Well, I certainly have had my my own interaction as well with neurologists in the past. So I was on a business trip. I got sick. I got just like a regular cold, I think, is where it started. And then eventually wound up just experiencing horrible chills in a hotel room. Flew all the way back home, got home and had the biggest headache of my life. And probably within 24 hours of getting home and trying to just sleep it off, I went to my doctor. My family physician said, I think you have meningitis. You should go straight to the hospital. They need to do a spinal tap and test you. I got admitted into the hospital. They thought that it was a cyclical migraine. They hadn't done a spinal tap, waited 4 or 5 days, and then all of a sudden decided that they would do the spinal tap after I was on morphine and just, couldn't get this thing to go away. Yeah, I mean, I'm so thankful at the end that they did the spinal tap and they figured out, yes, it was my meningitis. It was viral meningitis. And luckily it didn't kill me in the process. So, definitely very thankful for that end of things. To talk a little bit more about sort of the patients that you normally see. I mean, that's the only reason why I'm bringing up my journey.
Right.
What do the patients normally look like whenever they come in to see you, and what sort of symptoms are they experiencing?
Right. First, I just want to say I feel sad to hear about your very difficult illness, and it sounded like you had a difficult clinical course. And I'm thankful to see that you look good to me and that you were appropriately diagnosed and you recovered. So that is good news. And hopefully, you won't have to endure any more difficult situations like that. So for me, as I said, I'm like a subspecialist, right? So I have treat a lot of headache patients. People come in with headache, and I really kind of have an interest in treating headache that comes from neck pain, and I do some kind of unusual things with that. I also treat headache related to concussion, and that's how our business bloomed, which I can talk about. But I treat spine pain, a lot of
Mm.
spinal pain. I do the standard things in my specialty: injections, spinal cord stimulators. I do small fracture repairs and those kind of things. But one of the innovative things I'm enjoying right now are the peripheral nerve stimulators, where I put it in the neck over the nerves that form in the neck that go all the way up to the front of the head, that are often involved in what we call cervicogenic headache. And for once, our medical name actually explains the illness. Neck problems cause headache. So that's a newer procedure that I'm really enjoying doing because it truly combines my specialties, where I treat the structural problem that is triggering the headaches, but I also treat the headaches medically at the same time. And so that's kind of an overview of some of the things I do.
Very good. So, I mean, I also want to touch on the fact that, you have this entrepreneur, spirit as well, right? And so tell me a little bit about, some of the key milestones in your career that led you to want to,
Yeah,
also, build a company or lead a company.
right. So thank you for the question. And, timing is a lot because I had good ideas in the past. I saw some of the trends coming, like ketamine. I was reading the literature and I thought that would be good for patients, but I really didn't have the people around me to help at that time. And then I saw that the market kind of went the way I was thinking about it. And that was an internal turning point because I realized I actually did have a good idea. I mean, I didn't have the circumstances to pull it off, but what I was thinking happened. And that kind of gave me confidence, even though nothing happened in the outside world, right? But then, my co-founder Brett Landrum is a platform developer, and he and I had been talking for years about different business opportunities. And actually, his aunt is a neurologist. He had been working with his aunt when the urine drug testing was coming, into the fore, and he got experience with that and some other things. And so he was learning about genetic testing and urine drug testing with her, and we were talking back and forth as some of his ideas were developing. But the real turning point was when 2018, a new technology got FDA approval, and that's what really launched us. And so I could see that this technology was really going to change the market. And even though it was approved in 2018, a lot of doctors don't know about it yet. And so what happened is for many years, actually since Hippocrates, we've known that people have abnormal eye movements when they get a concussion. And if you've ever seen someone get a concussion, they get up and their eyes are just floating all over their head. The name for that, we call that nystagmus. That word is abnormal eye movements. So we had suspected for a long time that after people supposedly recovered from concussion, they still had these abnormal eye movements and we just couldn't see them with our own eyes. So what happened in 2018 is a device got approval to track the pupils and see this low level nystagmus or abnormal eye movement related to the concussion. And so for the first time, we could actually prove people have concussions, because patients come in and I believe the patients. They're like, I hit my head, I had a concussion 3 months ago and I still have a headache, I'm still dizzy, I can feel that I'm not thinking right. But those, of course, are subjective complaints, right? And I believe them. But now finally we had an objective measuring stick, and that really was where we took off and decided to incorporate that. And then it's gone in many different ways since then. So that was the first turning point, I would say.
Very good. And well, I mean, thankfully as well that you have that. I mean, there's nothing worse than having a symptom that can't be diagnosed right at the end of the day. Other than the feeling that we're feeling with no sort of path for treatment. How do you balance both being a co-founder as well as managing a practice? How does that work for you on a daily
Mhm.
or weekly or monthly basis?
Well, I have a lot of really good help. I have a group of people around me that have been with me more than 10 years. And that is just enormously helpful because they can anticipate, have a clinical person and then my patient coordinator. So we know each other very well. They can often anticipate what I'm going to do or say, and they do it without talking to me, and it worked. That's very, very helpful. So these people, they help things happen in a logistical way. Um, and then, we just have set things up with an organizational flow. Brett and our platform developers have built this platform to really help us optimize the way we work. So I would say it's a combination of the help that I built, a long time, over 10 years around me, and these relationships, and then the way we're developing our new relationships, and the platform we use. So those are some of the major reasons that we can work this way.
Also important having a good support structure around you as well. So tell me a little bit more about NeuroGlympse. So what is the mission? I mean, I feel like you've touched on this a little bit, but you just wanted to go a little bit deeper and really also um, ask you about Rhymetrics. That also came up in my notes as well, and how these companies are innovating in the fields of neurology and psychiatry and cardiology.
Thank you. That's a great question. So I'll kind of go through the pathway and the next major milestone, and that'll hopefully, expand things out for you. Okay, so we decided to apply the technology, the concussion diagnosis technology, to help people get a diagnosis, because most people sadly don't understand that they have a post-concussive syndrome, right? So they know they hit their head, but they don't often understand the importance of it, that's what these symptoms still are: the insomnia, the headaches, the trouble thinking, the light and sound sensitivity. That and other symptoms are part of what we call the post-concussive syndrome. And so when people can have something named, it often helps them, because then they're like, oh, this is what this is all about. Now it makes sense. So that's the first thing we try to do, is use an online platform. Basically, we use a tele-neurology consultation. So why do we do that? Well, there's a worldwide and a nationwide shortage of neurologists. So people have to wait a long time to see a neurologist, unfortunately, in every market, particularly the rural markets, but really in every market. So we wanted to offer that quickly, so that people could get a diagnosis, right, and understand what's happening to them. And we do that with the test I described. So what I'm doing is reading a test. It's called a nystagmogram. It's eye movements. Nystagmus, I already talked about that. Along with the clinical history, I was in a car wreck and hit my head, knocked unconscious or whatever, or hit my head, saw stars, didn't go unconscious, any combination of things. And then we use a screening tool called the Rivermead Post-Concussive Questionnaire. So that's one of the better screening tools. And the VA has done a lot of research on that, because there's a lot of concussions. The signature wound of these most recent wars we've been in is traumatic brain injury. So basically, we're bringing those things together and making a diagnosis. Okay. So then the obvious next question is treatment, right? People need treatment. Diagnoses do help, but we need treatment. Okay, so we have rhythmetics, okay, which we named it that because of we use a certain type of heart rhythm. Then I'm going to talk about that. Okay, so what do people need after they get a diagnosis? They need treatment. And during the time we were developing this, the other major turning point happened. And that's, I think it was 2022. The government is the Center for Medicare, Medicaid Services that does our codes, right? That are billing codes. And they changed the billing codes to include remote therapeutic monitoring and remote patient monitoring in a new and different way. And the pandemic probably had something to do with that. So Brett is the one who, my partner Brett Landrum is the one who found these codes. And so then we started realizing that we could use remote therapeutic monitoring, remote patient monitoring to direct care for patients and triage them through care, which I'm happy to talk about. And it's very exciting. We've really been able to change the trajectory of some patients' illnesses, and I'll be happy to share about that.
Yeah, please do. That would be great.
Yeah, so whenever people have a concussion, the brain it's floating in a box of water, right? And the box is the skull, the brain's floating. And so when there's an acceleration or deceleration, the brain hits the side of that box or the skull. And there's torsion, right? There's twisting back and forth. And unfortunately, one of the parts of the brain most vulnerable in a concussion are these big frontal lobes, right? That make us human. That's where we think. We feel joy, sadness. That's what makes us, be able to analyze problems and unfortunately have depressions, right? So after concussions, oftentimes people have mood disorders. They have anxiety and depression. It's part of the brain injury, and it's very difficult for them. Fortunately, most people do recover, right? But then you get into that subset of people that are not doing well. And, we're taking them, like I say, we're triaging them, and I'll get into more about how we do that. But what we've been able to do is bring in a treatment called transcranial magnetic stimulation to treat these very significant mood disorders, because that's what it's FDA indicated for. So this is what that is. A magnet, a big magnet is placed on the left side of the head. We call it over the prefrontal cortex, okay, but this is all mapped out very specifically. The person sits, in essence, it looks like a dental chair. They have this magnet over their head, and it stimulates about a little more than a centimeter into the brain. 36 treatments are done. The treatments last, that's standard, treatments last about 20 minutes, and there's a very high response rate to this treatment. And these are the people that didn't respond to the standard medicines. So an independent psychiatrist, reviews people to see if they're appropriate for transcranial magnetic stimulation. We call that TMS. And so we feel really good that we've been able to treat, identify, and direct people into TMS and truly change the trajectory of their course and help them get better and get back to their lives and their work and their families and all those things that we want to do.
Very good. So, in terms of the developing these products, there has to have been some pretty major challenges that you've run into along the way. So, can you share with us just a little bit more of what those challenges were, and how did you innovate through them and overcome them?
Yeah, that's really interesting because I've already mentioned that this device got approval in 2018 for the eye movements, right? And so when something new comes out like this, people don't understand it. New technology, there's this learning curve when things come to market that there's resistance because it's brand new, right? People don't know what it is. So we were just starting to come out and bring people in to, use our product. And then the pandemic hit, right? And so we couldn't really talk to anybody. I mean, of course, we were trying to talk to people, and we were talking on Zoom, but it's just different because when you're really a baby company and trying to build those relationships. So that was a big, a pretty significant obstacle. It definitely slowed us down. Um, but on the other hand, it let us think more deeply and build our platform and hone our process and hone our teleneurology consultation, right? And so that was the advantage. It slowed us down so that we went deep and improved our product, but it slowed us down, both of those things, right? So then, of course, when we started getting more business, it's the glitches and some of these things I'm a bystander at because like the platform developers are working on that, like trying to smooth out. We've gone through so many iterations, many iterations on improving the platform. And my role is more to make comments about how this handles patient flow and, point out the things are going wrong. But, we rely on the developers, the development team. And I mean, we do all meet, but we all have our roles, to play. But then when we started with the remote therapeutic monitoring, okay, so that's another thing, and it's another technological application that people don't know about, but Apple Watches have helped us a lot. Okay, the Apple Watches it's basically a remote therapy. It does remote therapeutic monitoring and remote patient monitoring. And so more and more people are getting them, and that's helping us explain to people what we're trying to do because people can relate to it better because they're using their wearables, multiple wearables. We can talk about that because we integrate with many, we're like device agnostic, we call ourselves. So we integrate with many devices. But in essence, the other thing that we are still working with, but more people understand now, is our use of heart rate variability. Okay, so on your Apple Watch, your Garmin, your Withings, whatever it is that you use, it tracks HRV. And people are like, heart rate? No, it's not heart rate as in beats per minute. Like when I feel my neck or my patient, I'm listening to their heart, I'm listening to the beats per minute, which is, of course, very valuable. That's something we need to know. But heart rate variability is different than that. So what is heart rate variability? All right, when you look at an EKG and you see the little peaks, okay, those peaks are the RR interval. So even if the heart is like, say, 60 beats a minute, when you measure it in milliseconds, those peaks are doing this, okay? They're varying. That's what heart rate variability is. It's the distance between the peaks. So who cares? Why do you want to know? It's very important and crucial because this is what it does. It's the marriage of neurology and cardiology, and we have a cardiologist on our team too. And this is when we both, our eyes light up, heart rate variability. Okay, so heart rate variability is a barometer for how stressed the nervous system is. So if your heart rate variability is high, you're relaxing, you're feeling great, maybe at the beach. If your heart rate variability is low, perhaps somebody almost hit you in their car, right? Like you're in fight, flight, freeze. And so how do we use that? When people have a concussion, their heart rate variability plummets, it goes low. And as they start recovering, it improves. And as they go through different treatments. And so that's the physiologic parameter we're tracking in remote patient monitoring, right? That's what we're doing there.
I have an odd question for you because I mean this is not my background and it's not where I'm educated at all. But your line of comments there lead me to a different level of question. So obviously we have this electrical system in our brain, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
constantly going to control different things
Right.
across our body. Inside of our brain, though, we also have this ventricle that interacts with the CSF that's there, right? So
Right.
if there is fluctuation in our heart rate, because I would imagine that the flow of cerebral spinal fluid is pretty in rhythm probably with our heart rate. I would imagine, just guessing here. But so if those things are out of sync, does that mean that there's also some sort of CSF flow difference in our head then?
So that's a great question. And, your intuition is good because the heart and the brain definitely talk to each other. And that, so we can get into that. They talk, and they talk very intimately, but it's not through CSF. It's not the
Okay.
language they speak. The language they speak together is electricity.
Hmm.
Okay, so when people have a stroke in a certain part of the brain, their heart rate will go way, way down. When
Hmm.
people have seizures that go over the brain pacemaker, their heart can stop, they can die. That's called sudden SUDEP. We call it sudden unexplained death in epilepsy. Okay, so they definitely talk to each other. But the real way they talk is through the vagus nerve. Okay, and that's something I haven't gotten into yet, but we can. And we treat the heart rate variability using vagus nerve stimulation in the neck. So I didn't get into all of our treatment. I went straight for the TMS, which is awesome, but we use a lot of vagus nerve stimulation, and that's how the brain and the heart talk right there. Yes, and that's cardiology and neurology also meet there, and the cardiologist, Dr. Savello, and I spend a lot of time talking about this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I mean, you know, look, as an outside viewer and body owner, right? I sort of, I get to sort of hypothesize on these things, occasionally, and so it's a lot of fun for me to hear how it
Mhm.
actually works, as well, because it's not where I've studied. But yeah, so can you tell me a little bit more about how remote therapeutic monitoring differs from remote patient monitoring?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, so this is really innovative stuff, and it's where medicine's going to go. So let me back up a little bit and talk about the Apple Watch again. So look,
Okay.
I'm into my Apple Watch too, right? I'm tracking like my mets from exercise, my heart rate variability. I get upset, I see mine plummet, the whole shebang, right? My sleep. Okay, so we're tracking, a lot of us are tracking this stuff, but our doctors really don't have it. Now, when I'm with my cardiology friends, they want to see my iPhone to look at all my data, right? And they're like, oh, you're doing good. Oh, you're having problems here. Okay, but it's pretty fun because I see a group of older people, even for me, they're really into it. And they bring their phone and we look at their heart rate variability, and my cardiology colleagues tell me the same. So we're in this transition phase now where we're starting to collect this physiological data on ourselves. Like a lot of non diabetic people are tracking their glucose, right? And then the Withings scale, which we can get into too, because we partner with Withings. But so we're going to more and more have data, like actual data that we're collecting. It's a lot of data, and that's another issue. And it's going to change all our care and truly personalize medicine. And we're in that wave right now. Okay, so how does that come around to your question? All right, so remote therapeutic monitoring, that's the subjective stuff, which is we need to talk to our patients. People will tell us, right? So that's the concussion questionnaire. These are like we ask people, we do the Beck's depression scale and other ones where there's so many studies, we can understand what these responses mean about how depressed is the person. We do the Hamilton scale, that's an anxiety scale. We do the PTSD scales. We use the civilian questionnaire that the VA has. That's the one we use. And so we have all this subjective data, which is deeply valuable, right? And so that's what remote therapeutic monitoring is. But then the remote patient monitoring is actual physiologic data. So right now, in this particular part of our company, we're using the heart rate variability. Okay, but like I said, we're device agnostic, and we are involved with other things where we use pulse ox, we use weight, okay, we use galvanic skin response and other things like that, and other projects that we're involved in. So this is physiology. You're measuring the person's body, right? Which is really important. And so it's the marriage of the subjective, what the person is telling you, with actual measurements in their body where we can offer the best care. And so that's how those two terms relate to each other, right? RTM and RPM.
Perfect. Well, thank you for explaining that to me as well. So tell me a little bit about the success stories that you have with NeuroGlympse and any significant impacts that you've had on patient recovery and the quality of life.
Yeah, so it's just off. People feel pleased. And I mean, I know that's odd, but they feel that they've been heard when they get diagnosed with a post concussive syndrome. They're like, I didn't know what was the matter with me. I hear things like, I thought I was crazy. I didn't understand what was happening. So when they get the diagnosis, they feel listened to, they feel heard. And that is the first step to healing. So that right there is something very important to offer, and I'm incredibly grateful to be able to offer that, right? And it also benefits them because then okay, the way our medical system is, we have to get a diagnosis to get treatment because that's what triggers our system. That's a completely different conversation about how our system works, right? But the diagnosis lets money flow, right? The label allows the person to get care. Now, for me, the diagnosis is the starting point in the conversation. Like, a person is so much more than their diagnosis, and I don't want them to be siloed into their diagnosis. And they need to be respected, but yet that diagnosis is very important, right? So, just that part. Okay, but then the treatment, we're able to let them know, like, oh, look, your heart rate variability is improving, and they are improving, and it does correlate, they feel better. But I'll circle back around to what I've already said. The TMS has been transformative. I mean, even a lot of doctors don't realize TMS is available and how to access it. So we can give people quick access to TMS and change their whole course, change their mood and everything. And now I'm going to back up to what I talked about with vagus nerve stimulation. Okay, vagus nerve stimulation has been FDA approved to treat headache for over 10 years, and it's another thing that's not used enough. Okay, why isn't it used enough? Because even though it has FDA approval, it has poor coverage. We're absolutely thrilled that the veterans get it. I'm so thankful they get it and they get it quickly. And that's a wonderful thing. Other people have to pay cash. And so oftentimes it's not talked about to patients because we don't have coverage, but it's highly effective. And so in this context, what that does is it treats that terrible post-concussive headache, the headache after concussion, this chronic headache. And so we're treating that with medications if they want them. Some people don't want medications, and that needs to be respected. But every human being may have a shortage, a deficit of vagus nerve stimulation, right? Because we all need to be in rest, relax, and recover more frequently, right? Our emergency system is certainly needed to protect us in the world. That's what helps us focus. If we almost have a car wreck and get that laser focus, we all need that. But it needs to be offline the vast majority of the time. We don't need to be in fight, flight, and freeze when we hear news we don't like or look at social media that upsets us, or even if somebody yells at us, right? We need to keep our zen. Very seldom should we really be in that running from a tiger type emergency situation. It should be really rare. And so the vagus nerve stimulator switches us from the fight, flight, freeze to the rest, relax, and recover, and it treats those headaches. I myself have migraine, and I use vagus nerve stimulation for my own headaches. So, I mean, obviously, I believe in it. I know the literature very well. I find it highly efficacious. But more important than my idiosyncratic use of the tool, it is an FDA indicated tool, and I've given it to a lot of patients, and this has given me and us the opportunity to provide an excellent tool more widely, and we just feel great about that.
Yeah, just to touch on migraine for a little bit. So, what I know about migraine medicines as a whole is that a lot of them are very debilitating, right? I mean, they just essentially wipe you out for a day, and then whenever you come back from being on the drug or whatever, typically your migraine is gone. I know this because I have two children who have frequent migraines, and
Mm.
have lived with them as well. I'm just curious to hear, with vagus nerve stimulation, um, what does that treatment look like for migraine patients? And then, I guess, what does it normally take in terms of time?
Yes. I feel sad to hear your children have had significant migraine and yourself too. It's very difficult. I have it myself, so I understand. Um, Let me just put in context some of your comments. Some migraine medicines can be quite difficult and have a lot of side effects. I will say in the last 3 to 4 years, we've also had a revolution in the medical treatment of migraine because now we have the CGRP drugs. So you may see commercials on TV for Ubrelvy and Nurtec. Those are the rescue medicines, we call them. You take them when you get the headache. But then there's the prevention ones. They are like Emgality, Ajovy, and Aimovig. Okay, so these drugs are so clean, and actually the best drug we've ever had is the Qulipta. It's a pill. So I would say that the treatments have improved a lot. They've changed radically, even in the past few years, in a wonderful way. And the risks of some of our older medicines, like the triptans, can cause heart problems, make people's blood pressure go up. You don't have to endure that anymore. So that's my first contextual comment. All that being said, you can probably infer from what I've already said here is those drugs don't work for everybody. And some people don't want to take medicines. And so hence we have vagus nerve stimulation. So the dosing is 2 minutes. For prevention, it can be done once or twice a day, depending on the individual. And it can be done for rescue therapy if a headache happens. If somebody's 12 years old or younger, it's not for them. If they're pregnant, if they have metal in their neck, have a blockage in a vessel, have had their vagus nerve cut and some other things, it's not the right treatment for them. But that's actually a really small part of the population. So does that help?
Yes. Yeah,
Give you.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
So last few questions here. So I'm going to start with what inspires you?
Oh, I'm a curious person. So I'm reading constantly. Like I read the journals almost every day. So I just see things that interest me all the time. I've been like this my entire life. So I'm constantly having things I'm curious about. And my curiosity is I read a lot. It's spurred by my reading. Um, and obviously, I've devoted my life to treating patients and taking care of people. And when people are better, that's what keeps me going. That's why I'm doing this. I mean, look, I still see patients. I love seeing my patients. But part of what I want to do, the reason Brett Landrum and I have partnered is to affect a larger number of people and be able to benefit people in a new way with new tools that I would have never dreamed of when I went to medical school. I mean, these things just weren't even on the horizon. And now, I mean, they're here and it's happening and it's just a wonderful, transformative time. And I feel so happy. And like every day I find out new stuff. We're talking about new plans and I feel totally energized and it's really nice. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
What concerns you?
Privacy, patient privacy, on so many levels because, there's a lot of hackers. I have basic knowledge. I'm a user of our platform. I can help guide it by talking about my experience, but I'm not the developer, right? That's for other people, thank goodness, that they can fulfill those roles. But, I worry about patients' privacy in a lot of ways. With AI, like AI can help doctors write notes and, of course we want things to be HIPAA compliant, but I have fears about that. Yes, people deserve privacy. Human beings are vulnerable, and they need to be respected. And so those are some of my concerns.
Thank you for sharing that. And the last question, what excites you?
Oh, just that we can help people in new ways we would have never dreamed of. And it is very exciting. And I can actually see the transformation now that is going to be possible in brain health. Because, we hadn't had a new Alzheimer's drug in 25 years since I trained. And now, we do have Leqembi and I'm glad we have it, but it has significant limitations. We really haven't had new treatments like for psychosis. They're kind of just iterations on things that we have known about. We really haven't had new treatments for Parkinson's. So I'm saying this because this lets us know how difficult these problems are. The brain's the final frontier, right? So now I've pointed out the problem. I'm going to talk about the hope, which to me is really, I'm seeing it now, because the development of, now this is where AI is a joy, because we can analyze things and bring this big data together like we would have never dreamed possible. And it's called the omics, OMIC. So we're able to, just beginning, but it's clear where the trajectory is going to go in some minds. We can look at the genetics and across populations in these genome-wide association studies. We can look at the transcription, the RNA molecules, how things are actually being transcribed, the proteins, the structure and the shape of these molecules across populations. We can look at the metabolics. We haven't even discussed this. So there are diets, ketogenic diet, that can help some of these illnesses, and just a whole host of things. So these are the omics, right? And this data, all these different data sets can be brought together. And I think they're really going to finally advance in a way that's brain science. And so I'm following this very closely, very interested in it. And actually, remote therapeutic monitoring and remote patient monitoring play a role, because all that data can be married with how much is a person, are they falling down? Are they laying in bed? Are they going on walks? Are they not going on walks? Are they unsteady now? Are they using their phone very slowly? That's another one of our apps. Like, we have a keyboard, and we can actually see when people are developing cognitive problems or improving from cognitive problems just by the way they use their keyboard. Okay, so these data sets are I can just see they're going to transform everything. And it is very exciting, because I think we're going to make inroads in ways we had never dreamed possible.
Well, Dr. Ann Conn, thank you so much for being on the Life Science Success Podcast and for sharing your insights in terms of this. I mean, you definitely have me thinking about the future of traumatic brain injury and, all the benefits that can come from the different things that you're doing at NeuroGlympse. So thank you for being on and for being a guest and sharing with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Be well. Take care.
Thanks a lot. Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it, and last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.